I recently heard a wonderful interview with Dr. Sarah Glass and Leah Forster, and they spoke about trauma and the effects that it has on our system and how we heal from it. And it was really interesting how Dr. Sarah Glass described how we recognize if we operate from trauma. She phrased it: when we have an outsized reaction for a relatively small incident. And I think the example she gave is you have a little fight about cereal in the morning with your husband, and your mind is like full-blown panic mode. You're already thinking of moving out, and like your mind is going wild. And that is a direct result of trauma, when the brain goes into survival mode and really goes to the worst case scenario and works itself up and prepares itself, braces itself to have to cope with that. So the interesting thing is that I shared a while ago how when I left the Hasidic community, I was really traumatized because they sent police to break down my door. They tried to take my kids away. There's a whole long story that I share on my Instagram highlights, but it really rattled my whole nervous system in a very profound way, where I constantly snapped at my kids, and I was so angry at myself, like how come I'm trying so hard to be a good mother and I keep on losing it? Like, it's not fair to my kids, and on the other hand, like what's wrong with me? That was my only available way to frame it, like as if I'm at fault, And I actually went to a workshop. They had advertised in the clinic that there's a anger management workshop, and I was so delighted. I'll finally have a solution to my problem. And I went all the way to the other side of town, and I was sitting in the clinic and waiting to be interviewed by the intake, by the social worker, so she can let me join this workshop. It was like, I think, a 6-week workshop. And I get called into the office of the social worker, and she asked me all kinds of questions. And she says she's not accepting me in the anger management workshop. And I'm like, at first my heart sank, because like I was looking forward to this. But then she explains to me, your problem is not anger. Your problem is trauma. Like, she heard a little bit of my story, and she's like, you never dealt with the trauma. That's why it keeps on coming up in these outsized reactions. And she offered, thankfully, over 2 years of free therapy. Like, the government covered it at the time, and it saved my life. It changed my life drastically in a very profound way. And I'm not saying like it healed the trauma, but it really started my healing journey in a very profound way. And why am I sharing this? Because there is a confusion sometimes. People think that this world we live in, which is very capitalist, like focused on extracting everybody's everything that they can offer, and like almost like an orange to squeeze everything out of them and then throw away if they don't have any juice left. So we are very much trained to think that way, that our value is based on what we can give, and we forget that we have innate value. You are not dependent on what you do. That's not your worth. You are who you are, not what you do. And what happens is, in that culture, there's a strong drive to hustle and to constantly extract more, right? And whenever there's some profound loss or some horrific abuse that somebody goes through, there's always this narrative like, just move on. Like it's not good to dwell on bad feelings and all that stuff. So there's a lot of stigma around grief. And what happens is we confuse between two things. On social media, there's a lot of toxic positivity, of course, like whenever you have a bad day, just paste a smile and fake it till you make it and all that. But there's a truth in every lie, right? So there is a point to sometimes activate those hormones in ourselves and put on that smile even when we don't feel like it. But there's a big difference here. If it's a little thing, like I'm going to give you an example. I wake up this morning and I stepped into vomit that my little cat had not been feeling well last night. So I stepped into it. And in the past, it would have been like more ruining my day. Not in a way like I would be an outsized reaction specifically, but I would feel more like make a meaning out of it. Like Brene Brown says, we are meaning-making machines. So I would right away feel like, oh, this is going to be a bad day, or this is some kind of punishment from God, like some way of interpreting that incident and making a whole story out of it. And I was so proud and so happy that this was like nothing to me. Like I didn't even give it any extra thought. I was just cleaning up the mess and moving on with my day. And I had actually listened to a wonderful program in the past where they point out very much how the example they gave is a bottle of mayonnaise breaks in the morning and it ruins your whole day because you tell yourself, oh, this is going to be a bad day. Like that kind of start to your day is not a good way to program your mind, right? Because our mind is like a tape recorder. It just repeats everything we tell it. So it keeps on going in loops. And in that program was the first time that I heard this concept, like you just clean it up and move forward. And it helped me a lot. But that's why I needed to make all this preface about trauma, because you cannot force yourself into moving on. This is not a healthy way of living. Every emotion that you feel is valid and is important to address. So sometimes if it's a small thing, like stepping into a little bit of vomit and having to clean it up, it didn't bring up any big emotions anymore. So obviously, just moving on, moving forward. But when you do feel a big hurt, then it's not about the mayonnaise. It's not about the vomit. It's about a lot more history that this brought up in you, and that needs to be addressed. You can't just paste on a smile and bypass all these strong emotions that come up. Because what happens with emotions, they don't go away. They just grow. If we push it down, they fester and they become toxically, how do you call it? Like they eat you up inside. Even when you think that you have moved on, it's not like the book, The Body Keeps Score. We may have forgotten what got us in that tense mode, but our body remembers. So I hope this helps. Have a wonderful rest of the day.